Pope Francis has passed into the great beyond, and while his legacy is complex, I am curious about one thing. Could he have been the last line of defense against something much more dangerous? Good morning, fellow skeptics. Welcome back to Theocracy Watch.
Yeah.
Today's segment is about what happens when a stabilizer leaves the room. This morning, Pope Francis died at the age of 88. He was a man full of contradictions, a pope who upheld Catholic tradition, but he also nudged it a little bit. He wasn't perfect, and he didn't go far enough for many of us, but he was undeniably a progressive in a deep conservative institution. And now that seat is empty. Pope Francis spoke out for the planet, for the poor. He offered blessings to LGBTQ Catholics when his others didn't do so, and he allowed blessings for gay marriage. He held the first global summit on sexual abuse in 2019 and opened the door to dialogue about divorced Catholics, women's roles, and even celibacy in the priesthood. He called for an end to the death penalty. He confronted child abuse crisis more openly than most before him, but it will never be enough to fix the damage that has done, the numerous tragedies. And now he'll be replaced, but by whom? Because the next pope could double down on dogma. He could undo what little ground has been gained. Could he weaponize religion in ways that we're seeing in our governments around the world? Or, maybe not. And while we reflect on his papacy, we can't ignore the weight of what came before and what still hasn't been reckoned with. The Catholic Church has a history soaked in abuse, cover-ups, colonization, and systemic silencing. From boarding schools that erased indigenous cultures to global sex scandals that shattered lives, those wounds are still not healed. And who takes power next could determine the truths that we face or what is buried. But please, friends, make no mistake, the Catholic Church wields enormous global influence in law, education, healthcare, policy. If you remember, we did discuss that the Catholic healthcare system owns a significant portion of hospital beds in this country. And whoever takes up this empty seat doesn't just speak for the faith, they will help shape the future, whether we like it or not. The world didn't lose a perfect pope, but we may have lost the last buffer between tradition and regression. And if the next white man, dressed in white, sees progress as a threat, not a path forward, we could be in for a very different kind of church. So until next time, stay grounded and be on the lookout. And as always, stay curious. So those are my thoughts on the matter. So basically what you said, I can't say that he's a wonderful man, but compared to some of the histories that I read of the Catholic Church, I'm thankful that he was holding ground and trying to push it in a different direction. Again, he was addressing things that many had not before him. He even didn't like the death penalty. Again, he was offering blessings to gay people, talking about women's place in the church system. And those are important topics. So I worry for what comes next. Will they be another progressive? Because there are some who seem to be kind of leaning that way, but there are some who are more traditional. So yeah.
Well, he also tried to counsel restraint against Trump during the last election, or he's during Trump's last presidency. Am I not right? Am I remembering that right? He's always during this time tried to be a mitigator instead of being, but what happens? What happens if we get a pro-Trump pope? A pro-Trump, anti-immigrant, pro-violence Trump. And it's not like it hasn't happened before, right? We already discussed that. I would have to say Pope John Paul II was my least favorite, but Pope Francis was my favorite. I'm just some atheist guy, but if I had to go on somebody, whenever I'd look at the news, I wouldn't think something horrific was going to come out of his mouth.
Yes, I think that is probably the same way that I felt. At least I wasn't expecting something horrific to come out of his mouth.
Yeah. And he did things that surprised me whenever he backed the gay people, and the things that he did were just so not popish. Generally,
no, not popish.
because it was like I mentioned earlier in the show, is Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa who said that, condoms shouldn't be used. AIDS was bad, condoms were worse. And Africa, despite the AIDS epidemic, went, just decided to not use condoms because of these people telling them not to. And it cost millions and millions of lives. So compared to that, so I have my favorite. We talk about the popes back in like 1300 or some bullshit who had orgies in the place. That's nothing compared to what John Paul did. John Paul and Mother Teresa, just what I mentioned. That alone, that's still not counting the abortion issue.
Oh yeah,
that Mother Teresa pushed throughout her career and all this stuff. So these people were very harmful to society. Nothing like this man who came up and took the place of Emperor Palpatine and kind of came off as a really, really pretty decent guy, So
Yeah.
Now, there's also conspiracy theories. After your Theocracy Watch, the first kind of thing I pointed out was what happens if we get a non-progressive pope in there? What if we get a fascist pope in there?
Yeah.
Well, just a few days ago, like I said, we already mentioned about how this pope has not been aligned with Trump. He's tried to say, hey man, be cool. And Trump is like, never been cool. He's not a Trumper, I would say. He's never been a cool Trumper person. And Trump's back in power. 3 days after Vice President meets with him as he's on the mend? He was in the hospital and he was getting better. But then a couple days after meeting with Vance, now he passes away, and suddenly a fascist pope in there. And now 6 months from now, we've got the president of the United States, the authoritarian dictator of the United States, wielding the power of the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
Dude, it couldn't have come at a worse time, at least for us in this portion of history. This is the perfect worst time. So
Man.
Really sounds anti-blasphemy laws coming soon to a neighborhood near you.
I mean, come on. And then the Pope dies, a progressive Pope. Look. It is not beyond their means.
Yeah,
Let's just say that.
for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Not out of their wheelhouse.
Nope.
I would not put it past them. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. Please don't come arrest me.
Well, okay, we could do that. It's not necessarily that they did it, though. Let's say they didn't do it. That's a conspiracy theory. We know. I mean, I just mentioned it here on the show. It's just a conspiracy theory. There's nothing more than that. Right. However, to the degree that they would actually see the opportunity and seize it is just amazing. Oh, yeah. I so wish the left could do what they do. I so wish we could.
We're not cunning.
And then we argue amongst ourselves so much. I mean, they do too, but it's messed up. Anyway, again, with the Pope passing and the circumstances, I'm eager to see. We should maybe look back on this in a while and see, man, were we right? I wonder how long it'll take for them to find a new Pope.
I wonder. I'm not sure.
Surely they know this was coming, though. This is not like he was 60 years old and he fell over. No, this is when he was in poor health. Yeah. So, I mean, I woke up at like 4 o'clock this morning. I actually got to sleep. I slept in for the first time in a long time. When I checked, there were already news articles about it, and they're like, he died overnight. Of course, it was overnight. But still, I mean, people already had news articles dropped, videos were going. I'm like, oh yeah, people knew this was coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably as soon as he got pneumonia, they were like, oh, come on.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty much a death sentence at that age.
It really does. I was surprised they had him out in a wheelchair when he was still recovering. But maybe because they knew, that might have been because they knew he was not going to survive and he was like, nah, I want to be out there with the peeps, man.
Yeah. I want to see my babies before.
Yeah, I want to see my baby.
I don't know if you know this or not, but I host the Daily Atheist Morning Show here on YouTube. I have a couple of other co-hosts with me, Durante Lamar and Ryan Koltastic, and we have a lot of fun. When we first started hanging out, he would say, he'd say something like, yeah, we're kind of like Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder,
yeah. I was like, you're right. You make the perfect Gene Wilder to my Richard Pryor. and I just didn't know if I didn't know if he was getting it or not. Every time we would do something like that, I was like, man, me and you're like chess pieces. We're like, I'm the black pieces and you're the white pieces. And everybody would just ignore it and move on. I'm like, come on, people, I'm working here. I'm working here. Live Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. Christians, did you know Jesus was not sacrificed for your sins? Click over here to see my video on why Jesus was not sacrificed for your sins. And check out my buddy Durante's latest video down here. Durante Lamar, he's great. Check out his video. And Ryan Coltastic down here. Check out Ryan's video. She's wonderful. Sin safely, my friends. Take care.